Hello, YouTube. My investigation of this macabre case from the USSR is spanning decades now. And I have books from the Soviet Union that mention this case, but not by name, because it still was not safe to do so. But I want to bring you some more information, and you should look at my other videos. You'll find a playlist in my channel about the Dyatlov Pass, so you can see the scope of my investigation and the information I bring you. The mystery of the Dyatlov Pass has been haunting researchers for many years. In the winter of 1959, what is referred to in Russian as tourists, but that's the linguistical perception in the Russian language. We're speaking about mountain hikers who went, you can say it, on a tour of the Ural Mountains, and they disappeared in the mountains of the northern Urals. Igor Dyatlov, a fifth-year student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, the head of the group, as well as Yuri Krivonishenko, Yuri Tarashenko, Rustem Slobodin, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolivatov, Nikolai Tibor-Brinyol, and Semyon Zolotaryov. As the investigation revealed, on a frosty and blizzardly night, they panicked and jumped out of the tent, half naked, and climbed 1.5 kilometers down the slope, lit a fire in a windless place, and died one by one. Their mutilated bodies were found only a few months later. The investigation did not establish the cause of the tragedy, issuing a vague, obscure wording. The tourists died from a natural force that they were unable to overcome. Well, in October of 2025, the Russian newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda republished a very unique book titled The Secret of Dyatlov Pass. All the documents and the main versions of the most mysterious story of the 20th century. So the newspaper talked about the old and new versions with Natalia Varsegova, special correspondent for the Komsomolskaya Pravda, who, with her husband Nikolai Varsegov, has been investigating the deaths of students for more than a decade. She became a guest of the joint program of Radio Komsomolskaya Pravda and the Russian Geographical Society Club of Famous Travelers. So let me present it as question and answer. And if you look at my other videos, you have been introduced to the Varsegovs a few years ago. Question: Natasha, how long have you and your husband been dealing with this mystery? Answer: since 2012, that is 13 years. Question: during this time, you have become one of the main experts on the case. Are you any closer to the answer? Answer: in fact, no matter how much we try to get closer to solving this mystery, the further we move away from it. We know so much that we cannot put all the information into a single puzzle. There are too many mutually exclusive circumstances and facts that do not allow us to build any kind of unified version, nor to understand in which direction to move further, nor how we can even assess the whole tragedy. Question: the main problem is that there is no main version explaining all the circumstances of the tragedy? Answer: yes. If we take the avalanche version or hypothesis, then it's unclear where the burns came from. If we're talking about crime, what are the extraneous traces? And so we can take any version, and all the time there will be some factor that excludes it. Even in the tourists themselves, there are many contradictions in their biographies. Question: are you talking about the most mysterious member of the group, Zolotaryov? Answer: yes. The most striking example is Semyon Zolotaryov, the man who was the oldest. All the others are either graduates or undergraduates. Zolotaryov was already 37 years old at that time. He had gone through the war and was awarded the Order of the Red Star for his deed in 1944. How did he get into this group? In general, there are a lot of oddities around him, starting from the day he was born. According to official documents, he was born on February 1, 1921, but I managed to get his metric from his native village of Prokhladnaya. It says March 1st. Why did he deliberately confuse his date of birth? Question: and why did he introduce himself to everyone as Alexander? And these strange tattoos of incomprehensible abbreviations that are on the body and then not? Answer: they were clearly described in the act of forensic medical examination by forensic expert Boris Возрожденный. Mysterious words, letters, images. But during Semyon's lifetime, no one noticed these tattoos, including the daughter of his roommate and his students. In one of the Ivdel archives, we found a very interesting document dated March 10, 1959. The first point is the issue of financial assistance to Zolotaryov's mother, 1,000 rubles for the tragic death of her son, but by that date, only 5 bodies had been found. Zolotaryov and 3 more bodies will be found only 2 months later. And the strangest thing is that for some reason, this compensation is paid by the Ivdel City Council of Workers' Deputies. What does he have to do with it? I understand if there was help from the Institute, from the Sverdlovsk Regional Executive Committee, but how did Ivdel get involved here? And why is there so much money? For example, the entire budget of the Ivdel Committee of Physical Culture and Sports was then 20,000 rubles, apparently in order to keep quiet and stay out of the way. Question: is there something they were hiding? But for what purpose? So that they wouldn't find out at the top? Answer: everyone at the top knew, judging by our discovery in the Moscow archive. The report on the tragedy ended up in Nikita Khrushchev's special folder. Some of the documents in this folder have already been declassified, and there was information about the Dyatlov Pass case. On February 26, a telegram from relatives of the missing Alexander Kalivatov had already arrived in Moscow, addressed to Khrushchev, "Dear Nikita Sergeyevich." By the appointed date on February 9, the group of tourists had not returned from the hike from the northern Urals. The search work started late, only after 10 days. Regional organizations have not yet taken effective measures. We kindly ask for your personal assistance in the urgent search for our children. Every hour is precious now. The document was sent from Khrushchev's office to the USSR Interior Ministry, and reports are already coming back from the Ministry of Internal Affairs to the apparatus. Yes, indeed, such a tragedy has occurred. The tourists have disappeared, that a search is underway, and even specific details are being reported. On February 26, searchers found a tent with abandoned skis, an ice cutter, a camera, blankets, and food on the southern slopes. And on February 27, 4 corpses covered in snow are 1 kilometer away. That is, everything is reported to Nikita Sergeyevich's office. Everything is under control at the highest level. Question: but why is everything being investigated with such big violations? Or was everything going badly in the department? Answer: no, not all of them. For example, the Ivdel Museum of Local Lore has criminal cases on Muncie. Question: cases like drinking or shooting? Answer: yeah, household matters. So everything was investigated more thoroughly there, although practically the same specialists were involved. But nothing is clear about our case at all. There are even no versions in it. The investigators did not consider any versions, hypotheses, explanations. At least officially, the only thing we see in the most recent document is the protocol, the decision to terminate the criminal case since tourists became victims of an irresistible force of nature. What kind of power we're talking? What is it related to? With UFOs, with the weather, did Bigfoot come? Question. So you think that they knew the truth somewhere but tried to hide it? Answer: well, judge for yourself. We managed to talk to Yevgeny Elkishev, who was the deputy head of the investigative department of the prosecutor's office of the Sverdlovsk region. He worked closely with Lev Ivanov, the main criminal prosecutor of the regional prosecutor's office, who officially led the case. When they came to the conclusion that maybe when the guys were victims of some kind of ordeal, they sent a request to the Republic's prosecutor's office. In response, Deputy Republic's prosecutor Urakov rushed in, ordered the case to be closed, and relatives to be told that it was an accident. They eventually dropped the case with the same wording. Question: everything seems to be clear about the missile version. There were no space launches either from our side or from the American side. According to official information, our combat missiles were not launched on these days either. Then what? An alien ship after all? The first contact that ended in failure? Answer: we can develop this version for a long time, but in theory there are no facts on hand. Question: but all the earthly versions are somehow broken. If these are escaped prisoners, then why didn't they take their clothing, meaning tourists, Dyatlov Pass people, groceries and alcohol in the end? Answer: the main thing is, as one high-ranking official from the Federal Penitentiary Service System told us, a prisoner will never run into the taiga. He will always run to a populated area. You cannot survive in the taiga in the winter. Question: again, the Russian Spetsnaz, special forces, came and destroyed them without they allegedly found, because they, the Dyatlov Pass people, allegedly found something similar, something military and terribly secret. Answer: I don't believe in this version at all. What are the challenges in the wilderness? Why go so far? And if the special forces had been working, the guys would have simply disappeared without a trace, and no one would have ever found out about this story. Question: yes, they went and disappeared, and that's all the fuss. There's all the fuss about the fact that the dead were found, and it's unclear what happened. We also dismiss the animal versions. Well, yes, there are no bites, no marks. And the Bigfoot? The answer is here. from Varsegov. There is a very interesting story here. Nikolai Varsegov and I traveled from the north to the polar Urals and even higher to Salihard along the Ob River. We visited several places where, according to residents, the abominable snowman lives. Question: supposedly inhabited. Reply: but not supposedly, it's serious. I used to treat everything like that, laughing, but I stopped when we started working on this version. There is such a village as Mezhdurechinsk. There we met with the son of a deceased woman who had spent her entire life collecting evidence about Bigfoot. The locals call it Kompolen. There are actually a lot of testimonies, and they are real. People describe in detail what they saw. Some even had some kind of contact. Here's a typical example. Two teenagers were playing on the riverbank, and then there was a noise from the forest. They turn around and see that something huge is walking right behind the bushes. We usually find out about the existence of the Yeti by indirect footprints, large prints, some kind of hut built in a special way, or someone is naughty in the windfall, and here comes a creature in person. And it was so real and scary that one guy immediately rushed to the village with all his might, and the second one's legs went numb and he fell to the shore. He told me later, I've never experienced such a feeling of fear in my life. Moreover, this fear began to cover us even before we heard the noise. And this huge thing, much taller than the bushes, just passed by and disappeared. It did not cause any harm. It did not utter any threatening sounds, but a trail of horror on some subconscious level emanated from it. There are similar stories, and many, from the village of Muzhi near Salihard. The locals have forest digs or some place for fishing on the banks of the Taiga River, like our Dutches. And so the husband and wife arrived messing around in the yard. They feel that someone is looking at them. They turn around, and about 200 meters away in a clearing at the very end, two people are sitting, a large and a small Kompolen. They are just watching. They don't do anything, but it's creepy. And they came like this several times. They were just watching. Moreover, the second or third time, there was no fear. In general, I would not dismiss the absurdity of the Bigfoot version. I have a similar story too. When we went on an expedition to the Dyatlov Pass in 2019, we talked to a woman in one of the villages closest to Mount Holatchakar, who retold a story she had heard from her older sister. As a girl, she went to get water. She picks up a bucket in the river and suddenly feels someone watching from the other bank. She looks up and something 3 meters tall rises above the bushes. It also just started, but the girl ran away in horror. Question: by the way, despite all the exotic of the Bigfoot version, it is the only one that explains the illogical behavior, illogicality or illogical way of the guy's actions. Answer: and explains the mysterious injuries. I recall the arguments of the famous forensic scientist Eduard Tumanov, a member of the expedition to the pass in 2019. He told about a case described in a textbook when an inebriated parent takes a baby under the armpits without calculating the force. He presses his thumb so hard that he breaks several of the baby's ribs. If we assume that a huge snowman grabbed the body of, for example, Lyudmila Dubinina, then it could have broken her ribs from both sides in this way. Zolotaryov has a similar fracture on one side. Question. And Tumanov mentioned another version for getting such unusual injuries. Answer. Yes, run over by a car. But a car in those places is even more exotic than the Yeti. Question. At least the Bigfoot version at least answers the main questions. Why did the tourists run away from the tent? Why didn't they come back for warm clothing? Why did one of the guys climb a tree, and what was he trying to see from that height? Did the creature leave the tent? Answer. Imagine, it's night, something huge jumps on the tent, starts crushing or hitting everyone. The guys cut the canopy, jump out, and see a humanoid giant. Even in the light of day, my legs will give out. Question. Moscow climbers, mountain climbers, masters of sports Bardin and Shuleshko, were sent by the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union to the pass at the beginning of the search. And so they write, the fear of women and death drove them out of the tent. A reply. Some will argue that this fear could have been caused by a mini avalanche that descended on the tent. Now, this is one of the main versions, but it doesn't explain why the experienced hikers, realizing that no more avalanches were happening, did not return and did not dig up warm clothes. Then light a fire in the grove below and wait for the morning. Vladimir Nikolaevich Sungorkin, our editor-in-chief and the organizer of the expedition, conducted an experiment then. He collected dead wood from under the snow and lit a great bonfire in a couple of minutes. In parallel with the Dyatlov group members, a group of Sergei Sogrin, also a student of the Ural Polytechnic University, went to the circumpolar Urals. Their tent burned down the first night, and they followed the itinerary for 3 weeks without it. Yes, it was difficult because they had to make a special bonfire, campfire, etc. But they survived. They slept in the snow. And the Dyatlov group members could survive around a campfire under a cedar tree at the foot of the mountain. But they leave the campfire and leave. They're heading towards their own demise. When the criminal case was completed, Bardin wrote to his friend Evgeny Maslenikov, who was leading the search for the tourists at the pass. Zhenya, we need to write a letter with you in connection with the winter story to Khrushchev. After all, there's no guarantee that such cases will not happen again somewhere and with someone else. We need to ask at the top to consider the possibility of preventing such things. A personal letter from the two masters of sports can have a great effect. At least the question will be put on the right plane. We have to do something. Question, did they know something? It is unlikely that death from hypothermia was discussed here. Answer, yes, they knew something. That's what we're trying to figure out right now, exploring all possible archives. If the answer exists, it's buried somewhere out there. End of the interview. Well, you heard it. Let me add something else. The presentation of the book, The Secret of Dyatlov Pass, took place in Moscow at the Moscow House of Books located on the Novy Arbat. The Komsomolskaya Pravda publishing house has reissued Nikolai Andreev's bestseller in a new, more convenient format. Only the size has changed, but the unique content has remained unchanged. All the main versions of what happened are collected and analyzed under the cover of the book. More than 100 readers and several reputable speakers gathered to talk about them. Our book is 100% documentary. It encourages New Thoughts and Search for Answers, publisher Natalia Sherbanenko began the presentation. The author Nikolai Andreev said that at first he wanted to give up writing the book, but the famous editor-in-chief of Komsomolskaya Pravda, Vladimir Sungorkin, persuaded him. I'm not spoiled by the presentations of my books, so for me it was a real event. So many people gathered. What an exciting conversation happened. Not just a conversation, but an argument, a discussion, and a development of the topic. I was surprised and pleased that the room was full of young people. Many of them then came over for an autograph. Alev Khlobustov, a historian and writer, retired KGB colonel, shared his many years of research and noted that despite all efforts, it is hardly possible to say that the mystery of the Dyatlov Pass has been solved definitely. They talked about the reconstruction of events, the possible existence and appearance of the Yeti, the involvement of security forces, meaning secret police, military tests, natural anomalies, incredible coincidences, and today there are 64 versions of the death of the Dyatlov group members, but none of them has been proven. Our mysterious topic is deep and inexhaustible, said Natalia Varsegova, special correspondent for Komsomolskaya Pravda. Once again, we have thrilled the audience with the mysterious details of the tragedy. After the event, people did not disperse, but discussed various versions. In particular, they gave me a couple of interesting scenarios. We will study them also. So that's what I wanted to let you know today, and I will keep bringing you more details of the serious investigation into this tragedy. And stay tuned. If you like my research, please support through the links you find in the description to this channel. Please like my videos. Please subscribe to my channel. Please ask YouTube to recommend my videos and not to keep them in the dark. Appreciate it. Thank you.